welcome back to This, That, and Another, PPL's official podcast about the library and the communities we serve. My name is Jay.
And I'm Sophia.
Thank you for everyone who listened to the first ever podcast of This, That, and Another. We were listened to in Providence, but we were also listened to as far as France. Like we carried a little bit. So thanks to everyone who listened to the first episode. Sophia, I heard an interesting fact the other day.
What'd you hear, Jay?
In 1924, exactly 100 years ago, PPL started a radio show on WEAN that was doing a lot of what we are doing here now, talking about events and things that were happening in the library and in communities. And then 100 years later, almost to the day, we're doing the exact same thing. Do you want to hear audio from this radio show from 100 years ago?
Yes.
Welcome to PPL, see? I don't have audio. I tried to find audio.
Wait, was that your impression? That's what it sounded like? Okay, I see ya.
I went everywhere I could to try to find audio from that radio show. So if anybody has audio with PPL doing a radio show with WEAN, there's some PPL merch in it for you. But we have a fun podcast today here in 2024 talking about all things whales.
And whaling.
Later on in the podcast, we'll be talking to Soares, Cobb, and Becci Davis. Their exhibition From Hole to Horizon on view on the third floor gallery during regular library hours through June 24th.
For those of you who might not know, PPL houses the second largest archive of whaling logs and material in the Nicholson Whaling Collection in Special Collections.
That's right.
Within this archive lives the letters and logs of Captain William A. Martin. Martin was a black master of whaling ships in the 19th century and participated in 14 whaling journeys. Martin's last voyage as master of the Eunice H. Adams, leaving New Bedford for the North Atlantic on October 16th, 1887 was filled with multiple trials and tribulations. There are two exhibitions here at the library that intertwine the whaling logs from the Eunice H. Adams and the letters William Martin sent to Samuel Osborne, who owned the Eunice H. Adams. That's Stand to Sea by Alison Bianco and, as Jay said before, From Hole to Horizon. Before we dive deeper into the project surrounding the whaling logs, I want to make a shout out to the gigantic whale that exists right in our entrance. If you've been to the library in the past year, you've seen the ecosystem of papier-mâché life forms of all species. This includes this picture-ready giant whale. The title of this project is Blood Tide, and it was conceived by artist Eli Nixon and made possible by hundreds of participants ages 9 weeks to 83 years who helped form dozens of organisms, from fungi to octopi. This exhibition is an extraordinary display of community art making, cohabitation. It's actually 450 million years of existence, to be exact. First and foremost, Blood Tide is a land acknowledgement. As Eli says, both the process and the product attempt to decentralize colonialized notions of time and ownership, upset linearity, revel in impossibility, and reckon with our enmeshment with the more than human world. If you haven't already, we invite you to be dwellers and cohabit this ecospace, and also get involved in local products that ensure the safety, freedoms, and survivance of communities in Providence. If you're interested in tapping into all the performances, installations, and suitcase theaters by Eli Nixon, you can check out their website, elinixon.com. We also have their book, Blood Tide, A New Holiday in Homage to Horseshoe Crabs, currently in circulation, and it's also available for sale on their website. We also have Alison Bianco's Stand to Sea exhibition on the third floor of the auditorium lobby. This dives deeper into the Nicholson Whaling Collection.
Yep, during regular library hours from Monday, April 1st through Saturday, June 30th. These prints featured in Alison Bianco's exhibition Stand to Sea reflect the artist's research in PPL special collections. It blends a myriad of scrapbook references, aerial photographs, whaling log illustrations, and sentiments of historic Japanese papers to produce a view of her home state of Rhode Island with a bright and foreboding atmosphere.
And in her pieces, she uses copper plate etching. Two of her works span at least 6 feet tall, and what's also really interesting is she had site-specific frames made to wrap around the library walls.
I actually think that's really cool, and I want them for my house now as well, frames like that.
We're going to shout out Ben Watkins, who made the frames.
Thank you, Ben.
and also Riska for the grant that they gave Allison to make those frames.
One of those two pieces that wraps around the outside wall is called "So Ends This Day." And it's a phrase that was commonly used by Captain William A. Martin in concluding his daily entries in his whale log.
This is one of those corner prints that leads directly into Becci and Kai's exhibition in the main gallery. We'll get to hear more from Becci and Kai about their exhibition From Hold to Horizon a little bit later in the episode. The show is an immersive voyage toward liberation and inquiry into our complicated relationship with the ocean, sovereignty, and economies of capture. As artists and humans, Becci and Kai are thought-provoking and quite literally hold the poetics of waterways. Becci is a Georgia-born interdisciplinary artist and mother who finds inspiration in exploring nature, archives, memory, and connection to place. Kai is a Cape Verdean American sound designer, dancer, gardener, educator, and somatic therapist here in Providence. He also has a really beautiful meditation on horizon therapy.
I'm really excited to talk to these artists later in the show, both about the exhibition, but also how me, you, the audience, can be involved in the participatory elements of the show.
In this episode of the podcast, we have had the wonderful pleasure of talking with Laura Motley, who is the library's digital project technician. She is also a part of the National Digital Newspaper Project, which is funded by the National Endowment of the Humanities and lives in the Library of Congress. Laura is in charge of digitizing and writing descriptive metadata for the Eunice H. Adams ship papers. Welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Hi.
Can you tell us a little bit about the process for digitizing the Eunice H. Adams papers?
So the process, I guess a day in the life of the digitization workflow would be, I would go down to special collections and grab a box from Jordan Goffin or Audrey. And that was the box of all of the ship's papers. And that had about like 65 folders worth of archival papers in it. Then I would bring it up to the scanning lab, and depending on the size of the paper, I would either scan it on our flatbed scanner or on our brand new oversized copy stand, which was really fun. Jay also would help with that, learning to get that part in the workflow.
Yeah.
While the object's scanning, that's when I write the metadata, which includes subject headings. So if people are just browsing the internet and are interested in whaling, they can find it that way. But I also include descriptive metadata where I sort of describe the object and give a very small amount of context that's available from the object itself for researchers to find. After that, I measure it, and then that's about it. And then they sit on our servers, and then our digital librarian will move them into ProvLibDigital.
So obviously you've seen a lot during this project. Did you come across anything that you would say is your favorite?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things was, I believe it's from the person that chartered the ship. He sent a letter to Captain William Martin saying that William Martin should encourage the crew to collect ambergris, saying how valuable it is and everything. But in the letter, he was careful to tell Captain Martin to be a little covert about saying how valuable the ambergris is to the crew. So it was like a very interesting letter, because he would be describing how essential it is for them to collect it, and that they would get a small bonus if they collected ambergris. But he was also like cautioning, like, don't let them know they could be getting more if they just kept it, or they should be getting more of a bonus or something like that.
That's so wild, though not unexpected, that he was trying to be so sly about this incredibly expensive whale product. Can you tell us a little bit about what ambergris is and what it's used for?
So it's in the guts of the whale, and it was used for like fancy perfume as well as old lamps, things like that.
So I've learned something about outfitting sheets. What are outfitting sheets?
So the outfitting sheets were one of actually, I would say a couple of the papers in the project that I digitized. And it was like an inventory for the crew's outfits, or, what they got and what they were assigned to, but also like what else they had to like pick up at ports if they ran out of stuff. But an interesting thing is Captain Martin got an extra pair of jeans over everyone else because he's the captain. Okay, another interesting thing about the papers that really struck me right away, and this might be like kind of like silly, it's all on like ruled paper, like blue lined paper, or not all of it, but a lot of the papers is blue lined, and I didn't expect to see that in things from that time period. And I was also struck by how neat everyone's handwriting was for being on a rickety boat in the water. It's beautiful calligraphy.
Perfectly beautiful handwriting with the ebbs and flows of the ocean.
And like no watermarks.
Amazing.
Or ink drips.
If the everyday person wanted to see some of what you've digitized, where could they find them?
You can find the digitized papers of the Eunice H. Adams at ProvLibDigital.org. But if you go to our website, ProvLib.org, and go to the Nicholson Whaling landing page, from there, there's a link that links to a scalar site that has the 1887 voyage from Captain William Martin, which is the voyage I digitized.
Whether it's work or play you're pursuing, the Young Adults Room at the Providence Public Library has the answers for you and your friends. I'm looking forward to meeting you, so why not introduce yourself the next time you're in?
My name is Lydia. I am a teen educator here at Providence Public Library. So I do the ordering for the manga in the Teen Loft. When I started at the library, I was very excited to start ordering manga because it's a big passion of mine. It's something that I've been reading since I was a teenager. And it's actually one of the first places that I found queer representation that I saw myself in as a youth. And it really helped me kind of figure myself out. So when I started working here at the library and was able to order manga, it was very important for me to fill those gaps and find relevant stories that might be helpful to other teens who come into the loft who might be looking to see themselves in stories as well. So I'm going to talk about a few different series that we have here, and they cover a lot of different genres. It's not just romance manga. The first series I want to talk about is actually a dystopian sci-fi series called Number 6 by Atsuko Asano. The series is 9 volumes long, and there's also an animated version that's 11 episodes, so it's pretty short compared to some of the other shonen manga that we have at the library. So the main characters of Number 6 are both queer, and one of them lives inside of the city walls of this utopic, like almost like paradise city that seems really perfect, very like everybody is cared for. Everybody has, like on the surface, seems to be really happy and doing well. The other character is from outside of the city, like beyond the walls, where everything is almost like a desert. There's really no resources. There's like a lot of poverty. It's just like an entirely different world, almost like post-apocalyptic world. When we start the series, the main character that we're following is Shion, who lives inside of the city walls, is attending a school there, is a very gifted student, and is really unaware of the world outside of the city. He meets Nezumi, who is the main character from outside the city, who is like a fugitive on the run, and he basically hides him from the government, who is like looking for him, trying to find him before he's able to like expose any of the city's secrets. So he houses this character for the night. They're both kids at this point, and the next day, the boy from outside the city, Nezumi, has disappeared. So fast forward, now it's like years in the future. Shion is an adult, and there's this weird virus going around the city, people getting stung by bees, and then their lives are basically like sucked out of them. And it's this whole like conspiracy mystery. What's going on with these bees? Where did they come from? Also, he's starting to like be followed by the government because they know that he's had contact with somebody from like the outside world, and they think he knows too much. So eventually he has to go on the run, basically, and he reconnects with this boy from outside the city. They're like learning all these secrets together. He leaves the city for the first time and has to like go out into the world and sees what the actual world is like. I'm not going to tell you too much more other than it's a very dark story, but it also has very like cute romantic elements to it. And their romance is very sweet. So I would say definitely check that one out if you like sci-fi, if you like conspiracies. So the next series I want to talk about is written by a trans masculine mangaka. It's called Boys Run the Riot by Keitu Gakko. It's only 4 volumes long, so it's another short series. It's more slice of life, and it's kind of written from the author's perspective on growing up as like a trans person. So the representation is very good. It's very authentic. And the story follows Rio, the main character, who is in high school and knows that he's a trans boy, but has not like fully said it to anybody yet, doesn't really have anyone to talk to about it, and is kind of dealing with all the dysphoria and all the kind of comments that are coming at him from different sides without really being able to like share it with anybody because he feels like nobody's going to understand or support him if he does talk about it. And he eventually makes friends with this new boy in school who at first seems like really scary, like a delinquent, but is actually like super nice. And they bond over a love of street fashion. So they're starting a street fashion brand together. And it's all about how like fashion and clothing can be this like really big support for people who have different gender identities, who are trying to like express themselves in the world, especially because in Japan, like a lot of students have to wear uniforms to school that are extremely gendered. So it's like when the characters in school, they have to like wear a skirt and a little bow and they just don't feel like themselves. But outside of school with their new friend Jin, who's like very supportive of their identity, the first person they can really talk to about it, they're starting this fashion brand together and making clothes that feel like really represent who both of them are as people. So it's a really great story, very heartwarming, very emotional, and is some of like the best trans representation I've seen in any manga series thus far.
We're in the sound studio right now with Becci Davis and Kai Soares Cobb. Becci is a mother, artist, and educator, and Kai is an artist and healer, and they are both the facilitators of the gallery space, the workers and the artists that have put together From Hold to Horizon. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start off with what's going on in the gallery right now. What's up? Becci, I'll start with you. Tell us about some of the materials that we have in the gallery space right now.
Right now in the gallery space, we have photographs that were taken from the Providence Public Library Special Collections, particularly items from the Whaling Collection that are associated with Captain William A. Martin. There's also photographs of Narragansett Beach. There are there's video, there's audio, there are multiple ways to participate in the space, or like interactive components to the space, and there's a space for relaxing and meditating and just sitting with yourself.
Kai, can you tell us about some of the materials that you have? There's some sound and some video.
Yeah, so I made a video and soundscape installation that kind of work in tandem with each other. The video is a recording of the Atlantic Ocean, and what I'm trying to capture in that is the slow movement of how wind and water and breath moves into the stillness of the horizon. And the soundscape that goes along with that is actually a field recording from May 2020, which might give you some context of my
May 2020.
May 2020.
What a time.
4 years ago, exactly. To the day, maybe even.
Right, which is also cool.
Yeah. It's
my son and my 2 housemates at the time whistle humming, which is a skill that I do not have.
I was going to ask you to do it for us, but you can't do it. Okay.
I can try. It's like, it's whistling and humming at the same time. It's like this interesting way of using the vocal cords that when you inflect melody and harmony with it, produced this really beautiful thing that they were doing together. So I had a field recording of it and just kind of refracted that with different layerings and placements of harmonies and also a track of breath. And so when these sounds come together, it sort of, to me, doesn't necessarily recreate the sound of the ocean, but it recreates the feeling of how the ocean sounds to me.
So let's go back to the beginning and talk to me about this exhibition. What inspired you to create it? What was the genesis behind putting this all together?
For me, the genesis came with the discovery of the collections of Captain William A. Martin being digitized. And the library has been working on programming to celebrate, to highlight that collection in particular. So I heard that they were looking for an exhibition to explore that collection, and I got really excited. I had worked with the Whaling Collection before, and so it was already kind of percolating. I was thinking very deeply, not just about the Whaling Collection in particular, but I was at the time reading Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and it just seemed so aligned with what the library was looking for that I wanted to dive in.
My inspiration, as it often is Becci. And Becci and I have this art making or making relationship where whatever the other asks, we say yes. And I had also been reading Undrowned and being in conversation with Becci around that. And so that was kind of the thread that brought our thinking together around this project.
I was really lucky. I got to see Becci in special collections really often, looking at the narwhal tusk, looking at the different archives, the whaling logs. So for folks who are listening, the exhibition didn't necessarily have a concrete plan. It felt sort of really organic, and things were changing and flowing literally as the water does. Can you talk about some of the things that sort of created a different direction for how you were seeing and looking at the material, and also your own work? Like, what were those things that you were coming across that you're like, oh, wow, this is indicating another direction that we need to go into, or something that we want to explore a little bit more?
I guess I'll start here. One thing that I discovered when going through the materials was the different voices of the journals, and how the journals aren't necessarily through Captain Martin's point of view, but through his first mate. So I became really fascinated with how he was characterized by his first mate, the little details that spoke to who he was as a person, who he was as a captain, and what his, I don't know, I guess management style, you could say, was. And so I chose to include in the exhibition excerpts from each of the whaling journals that were most meaningful to me in developing a picture of who Captain Martin was and what it was like to be in space with him.
I became really interested in this question of how these sailors, how these people at sea, particularly these Black men of color at sea, located themselves. How they found direction, how they navigated. And I think these questions, right, are such sort of like archetypes in our all of our psyche that are particularly highlighted for someone navigating the seas, right? Because it's an endless expanse. And so that led me into reading some of the books in the special collection about sea navigation, and I was absolutely blown away by the level of like mathematics, that these men were holding in their skill set it had never occurred to me that sailors were also mathematicians.
Yeah.
And so that sort of became like a driving force in Becci and I's conversation about creating not only the installation, but the activation of how people enter the space. And with this question of, where are you? Where are you going? How do you know how to find yourself? How do you find yourself?
Not only can people see from hull to horizon on the gallery on the third floor, they can also participate in something called activations. So what can you tell us about activations? When this podcast is released, there'll still be a handful left. So what can you tell us about activations and how can people get involved?
There are different ways of activating the space or participating in the space. One is through leaving your mark or leaving your presence, a relic of your presence in the space. And the way that you can do that is by coming during those activations. When you enter the space, there's a wall of postcards. You can choose a postcard from the wall, any postcard, and we'll replace the postcard that you take with a portrait of yourself. We have a Polaroid camera, so you can choose any space in the gallery to take your photograph or to have your photograph taken. And we will place your portrait on the wall. When you take the postcard has a series of prompts in it. So we ask that you take the postcard to the closest body of water near where you live and to reflect on one or more of those prompts. You can answer them on the postcard, and you're free to keep the postcard or to share it with a loved one. We don't ask for that back. We feel very strongly in the idea of energy exchanges, and that we wanted to create a space that offered folks an opportunity to participate and reflect on themselves and their own life. But that invitation wasn't necessarily about us, so it didn't have to come back into the space. We're happy for folks to just have that time with themselves and to leave their portrait with us as a reminder that they were here, that they were involved, and that they shared a moment with us.
I will also say it's a really wonderful date night or date day with someone. Another way to really being in space with water and getting to know yourself in a particular way. But it wouldn't be library love stories in continuation if we didn't express another date idea.
Another way to participate in the space that I would like to invite everyone listening here to participate in is to visit a body of water close to where you live. It can be a river, it can be a lake, a stream, it can be a little puddle in a parking lot. But take a photo of that body of water and email it to me. I will then print it out and install it in the space. We want to have as many locations and as many folks around the state or as far as the reach of the exhibition is to be represented in the space alongside us. So you can email the photograph to me at b.davis.synergy@gmail.com.
The title of the audio and video piece that I created is Horizon Therapy. And as it exists in the space, it's an opportunity to either sit or stand under the shower speaker in the space and listen to the sounds that invoke the ocean, that invoke breath, while looking at this moving image of the horizon and the ocean. And I was inspired by of course, the experience of these sailors living on a ship and being able to experience these healing aspects of the ocean, the way the waves move at this kind of gentle constant that makes you feel like you're a baby being held and rocked, and the way the sounds of the water, I think most people share, that's really relaxing. And particularly I practice in my bodywork practice something called biodynamic craniosacral therapy. And in that work, we have this relationship where we let our attention go from our own body all the way out to the horizon and track that attention moving from the horizon back into our body. This is something that we know to be as ancient as the human nervous system is. Like, it's a way of creating safety in the body to not only know what's happening right around you, but to go out from your own self to find safety in the space, maybe 3 to 5 feet around you. And then to let the eyes focus a little bit further, say like, 10 to 50 feet around you, sense what's around you, find safety there, and then go all the way out as far as the eye can see and find safety there. And when we know that there's not a threat in those zones of perception, that's how we find safety in our body. And so I think of this space inside the gallery as an opportunity to experience that practice. And that's a practice that someone can take with them.
When we had, Kai and I have talked a lot about how horizon therapy kind of reminds us of echolocation, of a type of echolocation, and how that relates to whales in particular, and their way of being in space and understanding the space around them, and also their relationships with one another.
From Hole to Horizon is on view in the gallery on the 3rd floor through June 25th. Becci, if somebody wanted to know more about you and your work, where could they find you online?
On my website at beccidavis.com, BECCIDAVIS.com. I'm also on Instagram at bdavissynergy.
And Kai, how about you?
I'm on Instagram at Soares Cobb, and my website for booking craniosacral therapy is kaisoarescobb.as.me.
Thank you for listening to episode number 2 of This, That, and Another.
And a special shout out to Becci and Kai for joining us in our very intimate sound studio this week.
And as well as Lydia and Laura Motley for their contributions to this episode as well. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Providence Public Library, on Instagram at Providence Public Library. And then, of course, you can check out Providence Public Library's website, ProvLibDigital.org.
Don't forget to send us your library love stories.
And we'll see you next time on the next episode of
This, That, and Another.